In any application where you're receiving data from users, you're going to need to consider the validity of that data. Users can't be trusted. They can't be trusted both from a well-intended user and also from a malicious user standpoint. I have to anticipate what the user might do with my system and thus check out the things that they could accidentally or intentionally do that could screw up my system. So if I don't add validation to my system, my program might just randomly stop working, fails, and nobody's happy with that. I'm going through, I type something in, I press a button, application dies. Worse, I could give the application could be running, but then it just is putting bad results out there. It's basically confusing users, and it's jumping randomly to pages, and it just becomes frustrating to deal with because I end up having to do a bunch of work over again. Or even worse, I could be giving what looks like good results that are secretly bad results. I'm calculating your taxes. I say you get $1,000 back, but you actually owe $1,000. Suddenly, the IRS and the users are not very happy with you. The net result is you're not going to sell much software. You might get sued over damages for that. You probably will get fired if you're working at a company. The point being is you need validation. Now, when you do validation, it's going to cost you more time coding. You have to sit around and think about what are all the different things users could type in here. How do I stop them from doing those things? Or, more exactly, what is the exact format of acceptable inputs here? It's going to make your life more difficult. It's going to make you have to spend more time in coding assignments, but it's going to keep you working. It's going to keep your instructors happy for now, and then someday your boss happy working within that. So we're going to talk a little bit here about how to do validation. It's a massive topic, and it depends on the format. Web validation has its own way of doing it. XML validation, a different way of doing it. We might see some regular expressions at some point. I don't know if we'll talk about it here, but you can look at different ways of doing regular expressions. It's something, it's a term I wanted to throw out there. We're going to just do it by hand. The important thing at this point is not necessarily exactly how we're doing it. You'll find more robust ways, and your company will have different ways of doing it, and there's going to be tools and components you can use for that depending on what you're trying to build. But I want you to get in the mind and the habit of doing it. I want to show you some strategies of ways of doing it in a repeatable fashion and minimizing the effort that goes into doing validation, because that's the key of it. I don't want to have to copy and paste code over and over again, or even worse, rewrite code over and over and over again. I want to find ways that I can have common threads, common ways of approaching validation. Because one of the things that ties into validation is not just checking for errors, it's also reporting out on errors. And that's where a lot of the variance comes in. So in this class, we're building a graphical user interface. No. That's exactly wrong. In this class, we're building a command line. We're not building graphical user interface. I'm thinking about the next thing. A command line. But the validation of data doesn't matter if I'm building a command line or a graphical user interface. They both receive fields and they both validate it. They just do it at different times. When I have a command line, I'm validating data one field at a time. In a graphical user interface, I'm doing them potentially all at once, or at least that's what I want to move up towards. And so the approach cannot be at a high level the same, but at individual field levels it can be the same. So what we're going to look at is I'm going to try and show you a way where we can create methods to help us with validation. Now this isn't a great method. We're going to build a better method than this, but a very simple method could be, is this field out there valid? So I can say I have a text field inside of there. I can get the text. This is a graphical user interface example. And then I can go through and parse that into a double. And if it fails to parse into a double, the field's not valid. If it is, it's true. This is an example of dealing with the field. I'm going to start with text, and I might turn it into something else. This is a way to check numbers. It might just say the number of characters inside of text. It might say what are the characters inside of text. There's a number of different things we might need to do to check stuff out. But the point being is we're going to throw in a bunch of little tools from our toolbox. We don't have a validation library we're going to be working on. We're going to come up with the tools ourselves using if logic, using method calls, using math, using comparisons, using, in this case, exception handling to go off and put these fields together and check them out. So the big picture here is I want you to be motivated that you need to do validation. You want to do validation. It's something you need to learn and practice. The next level of that is finding ways to capture and isolate this code so we can use it repeatably. Validation is a step, but it doesn't have to be a set of sequences. Think of it this way. You're running a lemonade stand. You, on each transaction, are going to validate the change that's going to be given. At the end of the day, you're going to validate that everything adds up. Along those ways, you're going to want to count your singles and count your quarters and count your dimes and count your nickels and count your $5 bills and count your $10 bills. I don't need to do all that myself. I can divvy up that work and say, okay, Bobby, you count the dollar bills, and Susie, you count the quarters, and I'm going to count the pennies. And then come back at the end. And that's the type of approach I want to show you. We're going to break up our problems in little reusable components like counting, like checking text, like checking numbers, and then be able to come back and put them together into a higher level application. So really what we're going to be doing in this next section is not just adding validation, but adding strategies for how do we put this all together to format a very simple, easy to use, easy to adjust command line application. And then hopefully, as you go to the next class, you also have components that you can plug into your graphical user interface and instantly get validation within those as well. So a lot of things are going to be going on here, and I want you to think about all the different things we're trying to do as you go through each of these videos.